welcome to Introduction to Access. I first wanted to start off by talking a little bit about asking people if they've used a database today. Most of the time when I ask people that, when I'm teaching this sort of course, they say, no, absolutely not. But when you're thinking about databases, especially with the world of technology, how many of you have used your phone today? How many of you have sent a text message? How many of you have made a phone call, did a Google search? Those are all databases. Other examples of databases that we probably use on a regular basis would be if we go to the doctor's office. They have all of our files. They call us when it's time for a yearly physical. When I just got a notice in the mail this morning about from the vet saying, hey, it's Bailey's time to come in. That's all in a database that the vet keeps. If you go to one of our local stores and you're looking for maybe a pair of tennis shoes in a specific size, but that retail store does not have them, you can go up, have them scan the SKU number, and they'll say, okay, it's not here, but we have one in the store in Council Bluffs or out west Omaha, whatever the case may be. Those are all examples of computerized databases that we use on a daily basis. There are many, many more, but when you think about databases and how the electronic database has changed our lives, it's simply amazing. So when you look at a database, and when we look at Access, when we go in and start using the software, you can break this down into 3 bite-sized pieces. So we're going to have our one overall file. Our file, and then within that, we are going to have multiple different tables, queries, forms, and reports that we're going to focus on today. And in each one of those, you're going to have a record. And when I say refer to a record, I'm just kind of hovering my mouse around the Jane Doe, the address, the city, and the phone number. So Jane Doe is one record. John Smith is another record. Sue Miller is another record. And then within each one of those records, we have various fields. And in Access, you can insert as many fields as you'd like to. In my example here, I just have 4 fields in each one of the records: name, address, city, and phone number. And again, today we're going to focus on creating tables. We're going to look at creating queries. And if this terminology is not, if you're not familiar with this terminology, don't worry about it. We're going to talk about it here over the next hour or so. And you will be able to walk away talking about databases by noon today. So we're going to look at tables, queries, forms, and reports. So let me go ahead and just share a blank database. If chat go. Okay, so in front of you, I have Access, Microsoft. I've launched Microsoft Access. And when I launch it, it comes up and it says, okay, what would you like to do? Would you like to create a blank database, or would you like to use one of the templates that we have built in for you? So if you have used Microsoft Word or PowerPoint or Excel or any of the Microsoft products, you know that this is the layout that it looks like when you first launch the software. And I'm going to go ahead, we're going to create a database from scratch. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Now, the one thing that's a little bit different about Access than you will see in any of the other Microsoft products is that it asks you to name and save the file right away. So I'm going to go ahead and just backspace and take out that database one. And I am going to call this new space presentation. The extension on an Access file is ACCBDB. And I'm going to go ahead and click on Create. Okay. And when it launches, it starts off and it allows us to enter information into those fields that we were talking about. But before we do that, before we start on our first table, and the first thing we're going to do is to create a table that we can work with. Before we can start entering data, we need to define those fields. So at the very top, you're going to see all of your various ribbons. We have File, it defaults to Home. You have Create, External Data, Database Tools, Help, Fields, and Table. And as we work through and we have various different objects selected, those ribbons are going to change as well. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to table 1, and I am going to do a right click, and I'm going to tell it that I want to switch to the design view. Now I could either right click. If you're a right clicker, you can go to design view. Otherwise, on the home ribbon, you do have those 2 views as well. So all the way over to the right, you have datasheet view, which it defaults to when you launch Microsoft Access. And then you have your design view, and that's where we're going to go in and define our fields. So I'm just going to go ahead and go to design view. It says, okay, what do you want to name your table? And I am just going to call this customers. So we're going to create a couple of tables and some queries, some forms, and some reports for a small business, a small bakery this morning. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to define my customers. So I'm going to go ahead and name that table. I'm going to click on OK. And you'll note that over here on the left-hand side, it now says Tables and My Customers. The next thing that it wants us to do is remember those fields, all the fields that are in the record and the records are in the files. It wants us to define those fields. Now, this isn't something that you need to plan out ahead of time. You probably mentally want to organize it. That's what I tend to do, but you can go in and add and delete fields as you find it to be necessary. But when you first go into defining the fields, it has an ID, and there's a little tiny key next to that. And that is your primary key. So you can see here underneath the tools menu, we're now on the design ribbon. In the tools group, we have a primary key. And you always want to have a primary key in each table for Microsoft Access. In that primary key is like our social security number, our driver's license number. There's no duplicates in there. So that's very important. Not so much for what we're going to do today, but as you build more and more sophisticated databases, it becomes very important. So don't delete that primary key, just leave it there, and it's going to auto number. So as we add customers into our database, it's going to start with customer number 1, 2, 3, and so on. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to put in a field name. So this is going to be a typical database, very much so like a phone book, or the phone book, that the contacts that you have in your phone. So the first thing I'm going to put in is just first name, and then I can either click underneath data type, or I can hit the tab key and it will move me over there. Now we have several different sorts of data types. The majority of the time, you're going to be using either short text or long text. I will be showing you a date and a time. Most people think when we go to put in a phone number that you should be using number. That's not necessarily true, but here are all of the different data types that Access allows for you to choose from. So you have currency, auto number, yes, no, checkbox, a hyperlink, and so on. And like we said, this is an introductory course or webinar, I should refer to it as. So we're not going to utilize all of the different data types. We'll save that for another hour that we can spend together. So first name is going to be my first field. Then I will go ahead and do last name. Just hit my tab key. Now you'll notice over here that you also have a description, and that is optional. Access can be networked. So if you are creating a database that multiple people are going to be working in, if it's not self-explanatory, you might want to put a description in here so that all of the end users of your database understand 100% what that field is for. Okay, so we've got two fields in. We've got first name, last name, and I'll just go ahead and put in address, and oops, hit my caps lock key there, city, state, our zip code, and I think that's all I'll put in for right now. So now we have in here, we have 7 fields in our table. So the next thing that we want to do is we're going to switch views. We're going to go from design view to datasheet view. And you'll note that when you're using Access that it is really wants you to save a lot, which makes some people feel very secure. It can be annoying at times. So, but if you try to go back to datasheet view without saving, it's going to populate a window saying you need to save before you can switch views. So I can just go up here and click on the little disk, save, go from design view back to datasheet view, and it's ready for us to enter information. So I can just go ahead, I'll just put my name in to begin with. And again, I'm just hitting the tab key to move from field to field and putting in some fictitious data. Once I'm done with my first person, I can go ahead and I can click down to put in a second person, or again, I can hit the tab key and it will move that data down for me. And I'm just going to put in about 5 people for us to play around with. Again, I'm just hitting that tab key. And I'll put one more person in. Okay, so now I have 5 different people that I have entered into my first table in my database. So let's go in and see some other things that we can do with this information. So I'm going to pop over here to the Create ribbon. And the first thing that I want to do is underneath the Forms group, I want to create a form. So I'm just going to click on Form, and it will pop up and it will give me my form. So it's a little bit easier to enter the data. It's a little bit user friendly. There are some different views. So right now I'm in the layout view. You have the form view and you have the design view. If I switch to form view and I come down to the bottom, note that I typed in 4 different records. So if I click on the arrow over, it gives me my second person that I put in, my third person, my fourth person, and it goes to a new person. So let's say that you have this out on just on an iPad, or you're having people enter it from the PC. In your business, you want people to sign up to be on your mailing list. And when you create this form, it makes it much more easier for the end user to go in and put in their data. So let's say that somebody comes into your bakery and they want to be on your mailing list. So all they need to do is type in their first name, their last name, and their zip code. Okay, so now they are saved into your database. So now I can go back through and I can see that I have all of my people in my database. I have 5 different records. I have one for myself. I have one for a Pat. I have one for a Steve, a Mike, and a Joe. And again, if I want to create another new record, I can just simply click on new blank record, and it will populate to number 7. Okay, so let's go in and talk about making this look just a little bit fancier. So I'm going to come up here to view, and I'm going to go back to let's go to the layout view. So I'm going to go to the layout view, and I'm going to select all of the fields. And I did that by coming up, and up in the upper left-hand corner, there's a little box, and you'll note that when I hover my mouse over it, I get 4 arrows to east, west, the north, and the south. And when I click on that, just like selecting a table in Microsoft Word, all of my fields highlight in orange. So I can go ahead and select that, and this will allow me to manipulate this form so I can make it look a little bit spiffier. Underneath the font group, right now I'm on the format ribbon. Remember when I said that a few more ribbons were going to populate? When I created this form and we're working with it, we now have the design ribbon, the arrange ribbon, and the format ribbon. So I'm going to come underneath my font group, and I'm going to grab my paint can, my background color, and I'm going to go ahead and click on the down arrow. It will populate my color palette, and I can go ahead and select any color that I'd like to. And I tend to like the color blue, so I'm going to go ahead and select dark blue. Now, the next thing that I probably want to do is to change my font color, because it's currently in the default of black. It makes it a little bit hard to see. So I'm going to come up underneath the font group again, and I'm going to go to the letter A, and I'm going to select that to be a white text on a blue background. Now, with all of these still selected, underneath the font group, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to increase my font size a little bit. Just makes it a little bit easier for the end user to see what they're looking at. For me, as the owner of the database to look at. So you can make that font as large or as small as you want to. We'll just kind of go with an 18. That looks nice. Okay, then what we're going to do is to get back, we're going to go back to design, and it allows me to go to my different views, and I can go back up to my form view, and this is what we have. So that makes it a little bit more appealing to the eye when we have that in there. So now I can go back through my records. I can add another new person if I want to. Okay, so I added another new person. So now I have 6 records, and I know this is kind of hard to see. Access does not allow you to increase the size of the working area or magnify it like some of your other programs does, or else I would do that for you. So now I have 6 records. So let's go ahead. What I'd like to do is I'm looking at this, and as a business owner, I'm saying, okay, I need to add some additional information to this. So I want to go ahead, and I am going to I'm going to save this form, and I'm going to save this form as customers, and maybe just June 2020. And we'll go ahead and click on OK. And note, if you look over here on the left, now I have 1 table and I have 1 form. Now I want to add some additional fields in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up to my tables, so my customers table, and I need to change my views because I'm going to add in a couple more fields. So I'm going to click on the down arrow. I'm going to go back to the design view. Okay, and the reason that it gave me that was because, let me just flip back over here and show you this. I was in the edit mode. So in other words, I believe that I had the zip code field highlighted for Charlie Pierce. I know that I am in the edit mode because I have a cursor inside of that field. So it didn't want me to move, or it wanted to close that before it moved it. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to design view. It's going to ask me the same thing. It'll close it for us. So let's say that I want to add something else. Maybe I need to know about my client base or my customers if they have any allergies. Let's see. And close that. There we go. Okay, so we're going to put in allergies, and you might want to change that to long text. Now let's say at the very beginning, the first thing that I want to know about my client is when is their birthday, because I want to send them out a happy birthday, but I want that to be the first field in my table. So in order to insert a field in between ID, actually not my first field, my second field, excuse me, I want that to be a field in between ID and first name. I'm going to hover my mouse just to the left of first name, and you'll note that my I-beam turns into an arrow pointing to the right. So I'm going to go ahead and select, I'm going to click, and it will highlight the field first name. And then I'm going to right click, and I'm going to insert a row. And much like Excel, if you're familiar with Excel, it inserts above the row above. So I'm going to go ahead and click on insert, and I'm going to type in birthday. Now for my birthday, the data type, I am going to put in that I want a date or a time. Okay, so we've got our 2 new fields in there. I'm going to go ahead and switch my views back to datasheet view. It's going to prompt me to save the table. I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, I want to save it. And now I have birthday in my first column and allergies in the last column. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to edit this and insert just a random birthday for each one of my customers. Note that when I click inside of that field, it gives me a calendar over here to the right. So I can click on that calendar, and this may take a while because it goes by the month, and if you have to go back a ways, it's going to take a while. So you can scroll back if you want to, or I can just randomly select a date for a birthday, or I can come down. Let's come down to Pat, and we'll just type in 11 14 47, and then we'll come down to Steve Isaac, and I'm just going to, like I said, I'm just going to randomly make up some birthdays here. And my very last one. Okay, so I entered in all of my birthdays. Now, the other thing that I wanted to know from my customers is, are they allergic to anything? So I'll just go over to Pat, to my second record, and we'll type in nuts, and we'll just leave it at that. Okay, now the other thing that you need to understand is I made the change to my table, but then you have to go in and add to your forms. So I'm going to go ahead and do a quick save again. I'm going to come down to my forms and double click on that, open it, and you'll note that it did not automatically update my form. So I need to do just a little bit of work in order for that information to be listed on my form. So I'm going to come up here to view, and I'm going to go to design view. And then underneath design view in tools, I'm going to click on add existing fields. And when I do that, it gives me a list of all of the fields available. All these fields that we just put in, these should look very familiar to you. So what I need to do is I need to put in birthday and allergies into this form. So I'm just going to come over here and hover my mouse over the word birthday. I'm going to click and hold down on my mouse, and I'm going to drag and drop birthdays in between ID and first name. Let up on my mouse, and it gave me my birthday. Okay, then the next one, we need to input allergies at the very bottom. So I'm going to come over to the field list, click on allergies, and drag and drop that to the bottom. Okay, now it looks like birthdays is getting cut off a little bit. So I'm going to come down to the bottom where it says form footer, and I'm just going to hover my mouse over this dark line, and it will allow me to pull that down and just make a little bit more room. So let's go ahead and select birthdays. And we'll make that just a little bit wider. So what I did was I came over to the very edge and I got the double arrow, the diagonal double arrow, and it just allowed me to pull that out a little bit so that I can see the birthday. And then if I go back up to allergies, that came in a little bit larger than what we needed it, so I can decrease that a little bit. We're done with the field list, so I can click on the X to close that. We've added in our 2 additional fields. So I'm going to come back up here to view. I'm going to go back to my form view. And now you'll see that it automatically put in the exact dates that I added for the birthdays for my 7 records. And when I click on this to the next record, which is Pat, for allergies, it should say that she is allergic to nuts. And it does. So we can go ahead and click through and see that those fields were added to each one of our 7 records. Okay, so I now have a table, I have a form, and you can see how nice and clean that looks. Let's go in and take a little bit of time talking about queries. So I'm going to go back up to my customers, and underneath the Create ribbon, I can go in and I can do a query wizard, and we will take a quick look at that. But the real magic here is the query design, because this is where the real power of Access is, allowing you to pull data from all of your entries. Now we only have 7 records, so we could probably just glance at that and say, okay, you know, 1 person's from Cedar Rapids, 2 people are from Papillion. But if you've got, you know, 500, 1,000, you know, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of entries, and you want to pull information from this database, this is the beauty right here, the query design, because it allows you to do so with great ease. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on query, and it populates this look. Now note that it gives me my customers. I've got that open. That's my table. It's got customers June 2020. That's my form. And now we're going to add a query. So the first thing that we need to tell the query is, okay, what table do you want us to use? Where are we getting this information from? You might have 10 or 20 tables in here that you want to use 1 or 2 or 5 of them to pull information from. Right now we only have 1. We want to start off with the simple and then make it a little bit more complicated as you go along. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select my customers. Now you can do this in one of 2 ways. I can double click on my customers, or you can see that my customers is selected and I can click on add. Either method will work. Okay, then I'm done with this window. So I'm just going to come down here and I'm going to click on close, and it leaves me with these options. Now it does give me the little elevator chute over here. I can scroll up and down and see all of the different fields that we entered. Or rather than scrolling, I'm going to come down to the bottom, and it allows me to just increase the length of this window. So let's go in and let's say that we want to pull all customers from a specific state. So what I'm going to do is, and again, once again, there's more than one way to do this. I want first name to be in, so I went ahead and I double clicked on first name, and you can see directly below that it has field, first name, table, my customers, and then I need to determine what else I want in my query. What other information is going to be pertinent for me to pull from my table, my database, in order for this information to be useful to me. So I can come over to my next column and I can click on the down arrow and I can select last name, and I can come over again and I can select address and come over to the next column, and I can come up and I can double click on city. I can double click on state. I can double click on zip. Personally, I think it's a little bit faster to double click, but it's whatever you're comfortable with. Okay, now, like I was saying, I want to determine who is from a specific, I think I said state, so we'll go with that. So you'll note that you can sort this information. You can choose not to show this, but I'm going to go ahead and show it. But the criteria. So within the criteria, underneath state, we abbreviated our state. So I'm just going to type in an N and an E. And what I've told my query is that I want the query to include the first name, the last name, address, city, state, and zip of just the people in my database, excuse me, that live in Nebraska. Okay, so now we're ready for the query to run. So I'm going to come up here underneath results in the upper left-hand corner of the design ribbon, and I'm going to click on run. And voila, here is my information. So it tells me that 2 out of, and we know this, 2 out of the 7 people that were in my tables, my customers table, are from the state of Nebraska. Okay, so let's go ahead and I want to save that. And I'm going to save that as Nebraska. Oops, I must have my caps on, lock on. Hang on. So I'm just going to say Nebraska. I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. And note that over here on the left-hand side, we now have tables, my customers, we have 1 query, and we have 1 form. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close up this query because we're done with that. And I want to go back to my customers, just at a glance real quick, to make sure that the query was correct. And indeed, you can see that there were only 2 people from Nebraska in my table. Okay, let's go back to create, and we're going to go back to query design. Again, I'm going to add my customers table. I'm going to go ahead and close this window. And let's look at another option that you have for queries. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to double click on first name, last name, address, city, state, and zip. This time, let's say in the criteria that we want access to pull all people that live in a state that begins with the letter N. So what I'm going to do is I am going to, in parentheses, so I'm in criteria, I'm in state, I'm going to open my parentheses. I am going to go ahead and put in a capital N as in Nebraska, and then I'm going to put in an asterisk, and that asterisk is a wild key. It's saying, I want you to look for anything starting with an N, and I mean, even if it wasn't a state, if it said naughty or nice, whatever the case may be, it would pull that information. Because all I said was N, and you can say NE, you can say NEB, and then the wild key, whatever you're looking for. I can go ahead and close my parentheses, and we'll run this again, and boom. Now we have 3 people because Steve Isaac lives in Laughlin, Nevada. He pulled in that query. So I can go ahead and right click, tell it that I want to save this. And I'm going to just call this states with an N. And okay. All right, I'll go ahead and close that. I want to do just one more because there are so many things that you can do with the query. And if we have time, we'll come back to it. But I do want to make sure that we get through everything else. So with my table selected, I'm going to go back to create, and I'm going to go to query design. I'm going to go ahead and add the customers, close this up. And this time I'll just do first name, last name, and allergies. And with allergies, I'm going to come down here because we know that one person typed in nuts. So I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, pull everybody from my database that is allergic to nuts. And I'm going to go ahead and run that. And I come up with one customer that is allergic to nuts. So I'll go ahead and save that. We'll just call this one nuts, click on OK. And you can see over on the left-hand side, I now have one table, I have 3 queries, and I have one form. Okay, I'm going to go back to create one more time because I promised you I'd show you the query wizard. And the wizard is more so if you're trying to get information that you might not want to save. So I'm just going to do a simple query wizard, and I'm going to click on OK. Oops, hang on. Let me cancel that. I want to make sure that I had the query nuts selected, so it was only pulling my one customer that's allergic to nuts. I need to make sure that I have my customers underneath tables selected before I go into my query wizard. And now simple query wizard, we'll go ahead and click on OK. And you can see that it populates all of the fields from the My Customers table. Okay, so if you want to use all of these fields, you can just click on the double arrow. It'll bring all of them over. I don't really want all of them, so I'm just going to bring them back. And I did that very quickly, so I'm going to come back. There's double arrows to the left and the right. Pull them all back over there. Let's just say that I want first name, last name, address, city, state, and zip. So I don't need their birthdays. I don't need their allergies. I might be creating a mailing list. I might be creating an email list, whatever the case may be. I don't have emails in here, so we'll say that we're creating mailing labels. And I need just that data. So I need to eliminate birthday and allergies. So I'm just going to click on next and open the query to view the information. I can go ahead and click on finish. And here is My Customers query. I'm going to go ahead and save that. If I want to rename that, I can do so very easily by closing it, coming over to My Customers query and highlighting rename. And I'm just going to say mailing labels. Now, the one thing that you want to be careful about is that I have this query closed. And by closed, I mean, you can see that I have my customers under tables listed, and I have customers June 2020 listed. If I had this query open, it would not allow me to rename it. Okay, so because I closed it, I can go in and I can rename that query. Okay, so I want to come up and I'm going to create a another table. So I'm just going to click on customers. I'm going to click on underneath create. I'm going to click on table. And in this table, I'm just going to have a few fields, not a whole lot. So I'm going to come up here to view. Remember, I need to go to design view and name my table. And this is just going to be my orders. So I'll go ahead and click on OK. And I'm going to leave my ID in there. Remember, that's my primary key. And I'm going to put in that I want the first name of the customer, the last name of the customer, and maybe we'll make room for them to order 3 items. So we'll just put in item 1, item 2, and item 3. Okay, so I have 6 fields in here: ID, first name, last name, items 1, 2, and 3. So I have successfully inserted the fields into my second table. I'm going to go ahead and go back to datasheet view. It's going to come up and say, do you want to save this table? Absolutely, I would like to save it. And I can go in and say, okay, what's the name of my first customer? And I just go ahead and use my name in here. I want my name, and let's say I'm going to order some sugar cookies. Okay. And I can put additional people in here. Let's say that Pat Moss also send in an order, and maybe he wants brownies. Okay, so for sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to save that second table. So you note that underneath tables, I now have my customers, I have orders, all of my queries are listed here, and my forms. So I'm going to go back over to create, and I'm going to go to query design. Now, when I click on query design, it has, okay, which tables do you want to work with? Do you want to work with my customers or orders? Or you can work with both. So I'm going to go ahead with my customers highlighted. I'm going to click on add, and then I'm going to click on orders, and I'm going to click on add. Go ahead and close this up. I think I've been using the close button down at the bottom. You can also click on the X right here. Go ahead and expand this a little bit so I can see what's going on. I can move these around a little bit if I want to. Now I can pull data from each one of these tables. So when I come down to the field and I click on the down arrow, you see what it's done? It says, okay, which ones do you want? You have information from my customers, and it gives us all of our fields, and it gives us our table orders and all of our fields. So we can do one of two things. I can come in here and I can say, okay, I want first name from customers and the last name from customers and order 1 from, or item 1 from orders. Okay, so I selected 3 different fields from 2 different tables. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on run. And because I didn't create a relationship between the 2 tables, it gave me everybody, and said that everybody ordered sugar cookies and brownies. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to close that up, and no, we don't want to save it. We're going to go back to create and over to query design. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add in customers, and I'm going to add in orders. Go ahead and close that up. And this time, what I'm going to do, rather than inserting manually the information that I want it to pull from my customers and from orders, I am simply going to draw a line, so to speak, with my mouse. I'm going to click on or next to first name and customers, and I'm going to align it with first name in orders. And I now have a relationship with first name between my customers and orders. I'm going to do the same thing with last name and between customers and orders. Now, when I click on run, it should give me the 2 customers that have placed an order. Oh, okay. Let's try that again. Hang on. Okay, so I've got that. Let me go back. Create. Query design. Let's add these 2 in. Okay, let's add them in. Let's add them in down below. So I'm going to add my first name, my last name, and the item 1. And then I am going to select the address, city, state, and zip from the customers because I don't have that information in orders. When I click on run, it now gives me that information. I've got something going wrong here if you haven't figured that out. Okay. It worked just fine earlier today. Well, let me move on just for a second. Let me go back up here to my customers, and let's look at one additional item that I wanted to share with you, and then we'll come back to that. I'll see if I can't figure out what's going on. I'm going to come up here to report. And when I click on report, what this does is it takes all of the information that's in the table that I had selected, and it allows me to print this off in a nice, neat, organized fashion. So with the forms and the reports, it just allows you to manage your data in a little bit easier manner. So right now I've got my IDs over here, and you'll note that those are selected. If I were to print this right now, it would go on to 3 different pages. You can see that because I've got dashed lines right here, and I don't want that. You can also see that I've got a lot more room in my fields than what I need. So I'm going to decrease the size of these. So with this selected, I'm going to hover my mouse over the right-hand edge, and I'm going to pull that in. Birthday, I'm going to go ahead and click and select, pull that in a little bit. Okay, now I've got some pound signs in there, and that's telling me that I didn't leave it enough room. So I'm going to go ahead and pull it back out just a little bit. There we go. And I can come over here, pull this in, select the last names and pull that in, select the addresses. You can see that I'm down to 2 pages now. I think I can get all of this on 1 page. I'm going to go ahead and pull that in and pull that in. Because I abbreviated my states, I don't need much room for that. And we're almost there. Pull this in a little bit. And now I have it down to one page. It's showing the number 7 down here. I don't really need that. I can select that and just hit the delete key and it will delete that for me. And now if I go up to it should be giving me a print preview. Where's my print preview? It's hiding from me. Okay, well, it will give you a print preview, but this is what it's going to, even if I did click on print preview. This is what it would look like when you clicked on print preview. Okay, it looks like we have about 3 minutes left. So with that time, I'm just going to go ahead and open up the Q&A. And if anybody has, it looks like all of the, oh, there doesn't look like there were any, maybe they were dismissed. If anybody has any additional questions, feel free to go ahead and pop them into the questions, and I'll do my best to address them for you. If not, thank you for attending this morning. Have a great day, and I hope to see you again soon.